I'm Audrey, 32, and I've been happily married to Michael for 5 years now. My brother Kyle has always been my best friend, so when he invited us to his destination wedding in Napa Valley, we were thrilled. Everything seemed perfect for the first 2 days: the venue, the weather, the celebrations. Then day 3 happened. We were at the post-wedding brunch when Michael suddenly leaned in and whispered, "We need to leave." Now. I froze. "What the hell are you talking about?" I hissed. Finally. He turned to me and asked, "You really didn't notice?" The bride, she. What my husband said next made my stomach drop. Before I continue this wild story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right about someone your family trusted. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened next. Michael and I arrived at the Silverado Resort in Napa Valley on Thursday afternoon, 3 days before the actual wedding. Kyle had gone all out, renting a massive private estate on the property with enough rooms for immediate family and the wedding party. The grounds were breathtaking: sprawling vineyards, manicured gardens, and a view of the mountains that made you feel like you were in a fairy tale. As we pulled up to the estate, I spotted my parents, Grace and Thomas, chatting animatedly with Kyle on the front steps. Dad was gesturing enthusiastically the way he always does when he's excited about something. Mom looked radiant in a flowing summer dress, her silver-streaked hair catching the California sunlight. "There they are," Kyle shouted, bounding down the steps to greet us. My brother had always been the energetic one in the family. At 30, he still had the enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. He pulled me into a bear hug that lifted me off my feet. "Where's the lucky bride?" I asked after he'd set me down and given Michael a firm handshake that turned into a half hug. "Getting her hair done with her bridesmaids. You'll see her at the welcome dinner tonight," Kyle beamed. "You guys are going to love Madison. She's absolutely incredible." I'd only met Madison twice before, once at Christmas for a quick dinner and again at their engagement party 3 months ago. Both times she'd been perfectly pleasant, but our interactions had been brief. Kyle had met her just 10 months ago at a charity fundraiser in San Francisco. Their romance had been a whirlwind, engaged after 5 months, and now, here we were. "Your room is on the second floor, East Wing," Kyle explained as he helped us with our luggage. "Mom and Dad are in the West Wing. And Madison and I are in the separate guest house because, tradition and all that." The room was gorgeous. King-sized bed, private balcony overlooking the vineyards, and a bathroom bigger than our first apartment. As I unpacked, Michael flopped onto the bed. "This place must be costing a fortune," he remarked, running his hand over the Egyptian cotton sheets. "Madison's parents are covering most of it," I explained. "They're loaded. Her dad owns like half of Seattle or something." The welcome dinner that evening was held in the estate's courtyard. Fairy lights hung from the trees, and long tables were arranged in a U-shape. I spotted Madison the moment we walked in. She was wearing a simple white cocktail dress, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. She was stunning, tall, slender, with the kind of effortless beauty that normally would make me feel instantly inadequate. "Audrey," she exclaimed when she saw me, rushing over with arms outstretched. "I'm so happy you're here. Kyle says you two were inseparable growing up." "I want to hear all the embarrassing stories." There was something practiced about her enthusiasm, but I chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves. I introduced her to Michael, whom she'd only briefly met at the engagement party. "The handsome doctor," she said with a dazzling smile. "Kyle told me you just made attending physician at Chicago Memorial. That's incredibly impressive." Michael seemed pleasantly surprised that she'd remembered this detail. "Thank you. And congratulations on finishing your MBA at Stanford. Kyle tells us you're already fielding multiple job offers." "Oh, it was nothing," Madison said with a dismissive wave. "My father has connections in the business world, so I've been fortunate with opportunities." Throughout dinner, I watched Madison work the room like a seasoned politician. She knew everyone's names, remembered details about their lives, and made each person feel special. She was particularly attentive to my father, asking thoughtful questions about his investment firm and seeming genuinely interested in his answers. "She's quite the charmer," Michael whispered as we watched Madison laugh at something my dad said. "She makes Cal happy," I replied. "That's all that matters." The rehearsal the next day went smoothly. Madison was a vision of efficiency, guiding everyone through their positions with the precision of a military commander disguised under a veneer of breezy calm. There was one odd moment when I went to use the bathroom in the main house and overheard Madison talking to someone in one of the bedrooms. Her voice sounded different, harder, more clipped. "I don't care what it takes, just handle it," she was saying. "We've come too far to mess this up now." When she noticed me in the hallway, her expression changed instantly, softening into the warm smile I'd grown accustomed to. "Audrey, I was just dealing with a minor flower emergency. Nothing to worry about." Her voice had returned to its usual melodic tone. As she brushed past me, I noticed she was holding a phone in a blue case. Later that day, I saw her texting on a phone with a red case. It struck me as odd, but I dismissed it. Lots of people had multiple phones, one for work, one personal. That night at the rehearsal dinner, Madison gave a touching speech about how she'd always dreamed of finding a partner like Kyle and how welcomed she felt by our family. My mother wiped away tears, and my father looked on with approving eyes. Everything seemed perfect. But as Michael and I walked back to our room that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slightly off. The second day of wedding festivities began with a champagne breakfast on the terrace. Madison was already there when Michael and I arrived, looking fresh and radiant despite having been up late with the rehearsal dinner. "Good morning, you too," she called out cheerfully. "I've asked the chef to prepare something special for us today." As we ate, I noticed Madison checking her phone frequently, stepping away at regular intervals to take calls. At one point, I went inside to grab a sweater and accidentally walked in on her having what appeared to be an intense conversation in one of the side rooms. "Listen, we can't afford any mistakes," she was saying in a hushed, urgent tone. "Everything needs to be in place by Sunday. The accounts should be accessible by then." When she noticed me, she quickly ended the call. "Wedding planner," she explained with an eye roll. "There's always some crisis to manage." I nodded, though I distinctly remembered that her wedding planner was a man named Jeffrey, and the voice I'd heard her call Sweetie had definitely been female. Back at breakfast, I noticed Madison was now using a phone with a different case than earlier. The blue one had been replaced by the red one I'd seen yesterday. When she stepped away again, I mentioned this to Michael. "Maybe she has separate phones for wedding stuff and personal use," he suggested, but I could tell he found it odd too. The day continued with various pre-wedding activities. Madison had arranged a wine-tasting tour for the wedding guests, while the bridal party was scheduled for final fittings and preparations. As one of the bridesmaids, though not the maid of honor, that position went to Madison's cousin Stephanie. I spent most of the afternoon in a flurry of dress adjustments and hair trials. In the fitting room, I observed Madison's interactions with the other bridesmaids. She was controlling in a way that wasn't immediately obvious, suggestions that were actually commands, compliments with subtle critiques embedded within them. "Alyssa, honey, that hairstyle looks so much better than what you initially wanted. Thank goodness we changed it," she said to one of the bridesmaids, who smiled weakly in response. When the hairstylist suggested a slight change to Madison's elaborate updo, the bride's eyes flashed with momentary anger before she composed herself. "I think we should stick to the original plan," she said with a tight smile. "It's my special day after all." During a break in the fittings, I found myself chatting with Stephanie, the maid of honor. When I mentioned Madison's Stanford MBA, Stephanie looked confused. "Stanford? I thought she went to UCLA," she said, then quickly added, "But maybe I'm mixing things up. We have so many cousins, it's hard to keep track." Before I could ask for clarification, Madison appeared, linking her arm through Stephanie's. "What are you two gossiping about?" she asked lightly, but there was an edge to her voice. "Just getting to know each other." I replied with a smile. Later that afternoon, I witnessed an interaction that left me feeling distinctly uncomfortable. The wedding planner, Jeffrey, approached Madison with a concern about the seating arrangement. Madison's response was immediate and harsh. "I don't pay you to bring me problems, Jeffrey. I pay you to solve them," she snapped, her voice cold and dismissive. When she noticed me watching, her demeanor changed instantly. "Jeffrey, I'm so sorry," she said, touching his arm gently. "Pre-wedding stress is getting to me. Please arrange the tables however you think best." Jeffrey looked relieved but wary, like a dog that's been unexpectedly kicked by its owner. That evening, during the bridesmaids' dinner, Madison excused herself multiple times to take calls. Each time she returned, she was slightly more tense, though she tried to hide it behind bright smiles and enthusiastic toasts. As we were leaving the restaurant, I noticed Michael waiting in the lobby. He'd been at the groomsmen's dinner with Kyle, but they'd apparently finished early. "How was your evening?" I asked as we walked back to our room. "Interesting," he replied thoughtfully. "Kyle's friends are great, but what?" Michael hesitated. "It's probably nothing. Just that some of the stories Kyle tells about how they met don't quite match what Madison has told people." "Like what?" "Well, Kyle says they met at a charity auction where he outbid her for a vacation package. But one of her friends mentioned tonight that Madison always tells the story of the meeting when she spilled coffee on him at a cafe." I frowned. "That is weird. Maybe they're remembering different encounters." Michael nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. Neither was I. As we prepared for bed that night, I found myself analyzing every interaction I'd had with Madison since arriving. There were small inconsistencies in her stories, moments of mask slipping that revealed something harder underneath her perfect exterior. But then I reminded myself that wedding stress could bring out the worst in anyone. And I was probably being overly critical of the woman my brother loved. Still, as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right with the soon-to-be newest member of our family. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with just enough of a breeze to keep the temperature perfect. From my window, I could see the staff making final preparations in the garden where the ceremony would take place. Rows of white chairs were being arranged, and an arch of roses and greenery was being constructed at the far end. Despite my lingering concerns from the previous day, I was determined to focus on the positive. This was Kyle's day, and he was clearly head over heels for Madison. Who was I to question his judgment based on a few odd moments? The bridal suite was a flurry of activity when I arrived. Madison sat calmly in the center of the chaos, a makeup artist working on her face while a hairstylist put the finishing touches on her elaborate updo. She looked stunning. "Audrey," she exclaimed when she saw me. "Come, sit by me. I want to give you something." She gestured to a small box on the vanity. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single pearl. "It's to thank you for welcoming me into your family," Madison said, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "Kyle tells me you're his rock, so your approval means everything to me." I was touched by the gesture and immediately felt guilty for my suspicions. "It's beautiful, Madison." "Thank you." The ceremony itself was picture perfect. Kyle looked handsome and nervous in his tuxedo, and when Madison walked down the aisle in her designer gown, there were audible gasps from the guests. My brother's face, as he watched her approach, was a mixture of awe and adoration that brought tears to my eyes. Their vows were personal and moving. Madison spoke about finding her forever home in Kyle and our family, her voice breaking with emotion at just the right moments. As I watched them exchange rings, I pushed aside my nagging doubts. Clearly, this woman loved my brother. At the reception, Madison was the epitome of the perfect bride. She floated from table to table, charming everyone she spoke with. She was particularly attentive to my parents, making sure their glasses were always full and drawing them into conversations with her family members. I put family members in mental quotation marks because I'd noticed something odd. Madison seemed to have very few actual relatives at the wedding. There was Stephanie, The maid of honor supposedly her cousin, and an older couple introduced as her aunt and uncle. Her parents were there, of course. Her father, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair who spoke little but watched everything with keen eyes. Where are all of Madison's friends from Stanford? I asked Michael as we danced. Or her childhood friends. It seems like most of the guests are either her parents' friends or Kyle's people. Michael's brow furrowed. I was thinking the same thing. And have you noticed how her accent seems to shift slightly depending on who she's talking to? Now that he mentioned it, I had noticed that. With my parents, she had a slightly more pronounced West Coast inflection, but with her uncle, her speech patterns were distinctly different. Maybe she's just one of those people who unconsciously mirrors others, I suggested, but I didn't entirely believe it myself. As the night progressed, I observed Madison carefully steering certain people toward or away from each other. She seemed particularly intent on keeping my father engaged in conversation with her own father. They appeared to be deep in discussion about investment opportunities, my father looking increasingly interested as the evening wore on. At one point, I overheard a fragment of their conversation. Thomas, with your expertise in sustainable energy investments and my connections in the Asian markets, we could create something revolutionary, Madison's father was saying. My father, who had indeed made his fortune in green energy investments, was nodding enthusiastically. I've been looking for an entry point into those markets for years. The regulatory hurdles have been substantial. I have ways around those, Madison's father replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Later, I noticed Michael taking photos with his phone, not just the usual reception snapshots, but deliberate images of Madison with different groups of people. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. Just capturing memories, he said. But there was a tension in his voice that I recognized from his most difficult hospital cases, when he suspected a diagnosis, but needed more evidence before confirming it. The celebration continued until well after midnight. By the time Michael and I returned to our room, I was exhausted but also unsettled. Something about the day had felt off, despite its apparent perfection. Did you enjoy yourself? Michael asked as we got ready for bed. Yes, I said automatically, then amended, mostly. Did you? He hesitated before answering. It was an interesting day. That non-answer hung between us as we fell into an uneasy sleep, both too tired to probe further, but too disturbed to discuss it properly. The post-wedding brunch was scheduled for 11 a.m. in the estate's garden. Despite the late night, most guests made an appearance. Though many were moving slowly and drinking the offered Bloody Marys and mimosas with grateful enthusiasm, Kyle and Madison were seated at the center table, accepting congratulations and looking appropriately tired but happy. Madison had transformed once again, now playing the role of gracious new wife. Wearing a simple white sundress with her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Michael had been quiet all morning, constantly checking his phone and stepping away for brief calls. When I asked who he was talking to, he gave vague answers about checking in with the hospital. This was unusual for him. Michael was typically fully present during our rare vacation time together. We took our seats at the family table with my parents, who were still glowing with happiness for Kyle. Isn't she just wonderful? My mother said, nodding toward Madison, who was laughing at something one of the groomsmen had said. So accomplished and poised. Kyle really found himself a catch. And her father's connections could be extremely valuable, my father added in a lower voice. We had a fascinating conversation last night about some potential joint ventures. Dad, you're not actually considering investing with someone you just met, are you? I asked, alarmed. Robert isn't just someone, Audrey, my father replied, looking slightly offended. He's built an impressive portfolio across multiple industries. We're having lunch next week in Chicago to discuss specifics. Before I could respond, Michael's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. Excuse me, he murmured, standing up and walking away from the table. Through the window, I could see him pacing on the lawn, his conversation appearing increasingly intense. When he returned about 15 minutes later, his face was grim. Madison approached our table just as Michael sat back down. "Thomas," she said to my father, "I meant to ask you about your thoughts on the Sherman portfolio approach to diversification. Dad mentioned you've had remarkable success with similar strategies." My father looked impressed and launched into a detailed explanation of his investment philosophy. What struck me as odd was that this information wasn't publicly available. It was my father's proprietary strategy that he developed over decades. How would Madison know about it? As my father and Madison discussed investment terms that went over my head, Michael leaned close to my ear. "We need to leave now," he whispered, his voice urgent but low enough that no one else could hear. I turned to him in surprise. "What?" "We can't just leave in the middle of brunch. The wedding was yesterday. Trust me, Audrey. We need to go. I'll explain everything, but not here." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten with anxiety. "Is it the hospital? An emergency?" "No," he said, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Madison. "It's about the bride." "What the hell are you talking about?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice down. Michael's jaw tightened. "You really didn't notice? The bride, she's not who she says she is. Not even close." My blood ran cold. What he said next made my stomach drop. "Madison Wilson doesn't exist. Your brother married a con artist who's been targeting your family, specifically your father, for months." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's ridiculous. How could you possibly know that?" "I'll show you everything, but we need privacy." "Now." Michael stood abruptly, putting on a convincing show of apologetic concern. "I'm so sorry, everyone. But I just got called in for an emergency surgery. We need to head back to Chicago right away." My mother looked disappointed. "Oh, must you? Can't another doctor handle it?" "It's a complicated case that I've been managing," Michael explained smoothly. "I wouldn't leave if it wasn't absolutely necessary." I watched in a daze as Michael made our excuses to Kyle and Madison. Madison's expression was perfectly appropriate, disappointed but understanding, the concerned new sister-in-law. "I was hoping we'd have more time to get to know each other better," she said, embracing me. "But we'll have plenty of opportunities when you visit us in San Francisco." As she hugged me, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, a flash of calculation that sent a chill down my spine. 20 minutes later, we were in our rental car, driving away from the estate. The moment we were out of sight, I turned to Michael. "Explain." "Now." Michael pulled over at a scenic overlook a few miles from the estate. He took out his phone and pulled up a folder of images and documents. "I knew something was off the first day we arrived," he began. Little inconsistencies in her stories. The way she subtly manipulated conversations. It reminded me of a patient I had last year who turned out to be faking symptoms to get medications. "So you decided she was a con artist because she reminded you of a drug-seeking patient?" I asked incredulously. "No. I decided to look into her background because my instincts were screaming that something wasn't right," Michael replied calmly. "After the rehearsal dinner, I contacted a college friend who works in private security. He owed me a favor, and I asked him to run a quick background check." "You investigated our brother's fiancé without telling anyone?" I was stunned. "I was hoping to be proven wrong," Michael said. "But what came back this morning confirmed my worst suspicions. Look." He handed me his phone. On the screen was a driver's license for a woman named Erica Donovan. The photo was unmistakably Madison, though with darker hair. "This is from 3 years ago in Boston," Michael explained. "She was married to a hedge fund manager named Lawrence Pemberton. She disappeared with nearly $2 million from their joint accounts right after he introduced her to his highest value clients." I scrolled through more images, Madison with different hair colors, different names, standing beside different men. News articles about investment scams and missing funds. "This can't be real," I whispered, though the evidence in my hands was overwhelming. "My friend was able to find 3 confirmed identities she's used in the past 5 years," Michael continued. "Madison Wilson, Erica Donovan, and Catherine Miller. Each time, the pattern is the same. She marries into money, integrates herself into the family's financial affairs, then disappears with as much as she can take. But how did she target Kyle? He doesn't have millions. Kyle was never the target, Michael said grimly. Your father was. Kyle was just the way in. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the evidence on Michael's phone. There were police reports, news articles, and even a warning bulletin from the FBI about a woman matching Madison's description who was wanted for questioning in connection with multiple fraud cases across the country. According to what my friend found, she's been operating for at least 7 years, Michael explained. She typically uses a team, people who pose as family members or business associates to help establish her credibility. The cousin, I murmured, remembering Stephanie's confusion about which university Madison had attended. And her parents, likely actors hired to play the part. The man posing as her father has been identified in connection with at least 2 other scams. He's known for targeting wealthy business owners, gaining their trust, then proposing investment opportunities that turn out to be elaborate Ponzi schemes. I scrolled through more documents, my hands shaking. There was a marriage certificate showing Erica Donovan had married Lawrence Pemberton in Boston 4 years ago. Another showed Catherine Miller had married Richard Hoffman in Seattle just 2 years ago. What happened to these men? Her other husbands? Michael's expression was grim. Financial ruin. Mostly. Pemberton lost nearly everything and had to declare bankruptcy. Hoffman managed to recover some of his assets because he caught on faster, but he still lost over $1 million. And now she's after Dad, I said, the reality finally sinking in. That's why she's been so focused on his business, asking all those questions about his investment strategies. Your father mentioned at brunch that he's meeting with her, father, next week to discuss investment opportunities, Michael reminded me. I'm guessing that meeting would have ended with him transferring funds into accounts they control. I thought back to all the moments that had seemed odd, but that I'd dismissed. Madison's different phones, her changing accent, the private conversations I'd overheard, her detailed knowledge of my father's business. We have to tell Kyle, I said, my heart breaking for my brother. And my parents. We need to be strategic about this, Michael cautioned. People like Madison, or whatever her real name is, are practiced at deflecting accusations. If we approach this wrong, she could disappear with whatever she's already managed to access, or worse. Convince your family that we're the ones lying. What do you suggest? We gather more concrete evidence, then present everything at once. No warning. No chance for her to prepare a defense or escape plan. I nodded, though the thought of confronting Madison filled me with dread. How do we get more evidence? Your father's accounts. Has Madison had any opportunity to access his financial information? Passwords, account numbers. I thought hard. Dad always keeps everything on his laptop. And he's pretty security conscious, but he mentioned yesterday that he was showing Madison's father some projections for a potential joint venture. We need to check if anything's been compromised, Michael said. And we need to move quickly. Based on what I've learned about her pattern. She usually makes her move within days of the wedding, while everyone is still caught up in the celebration. We drove to a nearby town where we checked into a small hotel to plan our next steps. Michael continued communicating with his security contact, while I called a close friend of mine who worked in cybersecurity. Jen, I need a huge favor, I explained, giving her a brief outline of the situation. Can you check if there's been any unusual access to my father's accounts or systems? Jen was shocked, but immediately agreed to help. My father had set her up with her first job out of college, and she was still grateful for his mentorship. I'll need his permission and access credentials, she said. This isn't exactly legal otherwise. I called my father, creating a story about Michael needing some investment advice for a colleague and asking if Jen could access his models as examples. Dad agreed without hesitation, providing the necessary information. 2 hours later, Jen called back, her voice tense. Someone's been in his system, she confirmed. They installed a sophisticated keylogger 3 days ago. It's been capturing everything, passwords, account numbers, communications with his financial institutions. My blood ran cold. Can you tell who did it? The intrusion came from a device on the same Wi-Fi network as your father, so someone physically present at the wedding venue. I've disabled the keylogger and changed his critical passwords, but whoever did this already has a lot of information. I thanked Jen profusely, promising to explain everything later. When I relayed this information to Michael, his expression darkened. "We need to go back now," he said. "Tonight, before they have a chance to use what they've gathered." We drove back to the estate, arriving just as dinner was ending. I texted Kyle, asking him to meet us privately, saying only that it was urgent and concerned Madison. Kyle met us in the estate's library, his expression a mixture of concern and annoyance. "What's going on? Why did you leave so suddenly, and why all the secrecy?" I took a deep breath. "Kyle, what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear, but we have evidence that Madison isn't who she claims to be." His face immediately hardened. "What are you talking about?" Michael stepped forward, opening his laptop. "Madison Wilson doesn't exist. The woman you married has used at least 3 different identities in the past 5 years. She's wanted for questioning in multiple fraud cases." Kyle's laugh was dismissive. "This is insane. You've both lost your minds. Please, just look at what we've found," I pleaded, gesturing to the screen. For the next 20 minutes, we showed Kyle everything: the multiple identities, the pattern of marriages followed by financial theft, the evidence of the keylogger on our father's computer. With each new piece of information, my brother's face grew paler. "This can't be real," he whispered, but I could see the doubt creeping in. "We've been together for almost a year. I would have noticed something." "She's very good at what she does," Michael said gently. "These people are professionals. They create elaborate backstories and have teams supporting their cons." "If this is true," Kyle said, his voice breaking, "then nothing about our relationship was real." Nothing. The pain in his eyes was unbearable. I moved to embrace him, but at that moment, the library door opened. My father stood there, looking confused. "What's going on in here?" "Madison said you all disappeared after dinner." Kyle looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded. "Dad," he said, his voice steadier than I expected, "you need to see this. It's about Madison." My father's reaction to the evidence was initially similar to Kyle's, disbelief followed by anger, not at Madison, but at us for making such accusations. But as Michael methodically walked him through everything we'd discovered, highlighting the unauthorized access to his computer and financial accounts, his expression shifted from anger to concern and finally to grim understanding. "We need to confront her," my father said, his voice hard in a way I'd rarely heard. "Now, before this goes any further, we should involve the police," Michael suggested. Dad shook his head. "Not yet. First, I want to hear what she has to say for herself." Kyle had been silent for several minutes, staring at the wedding photo on his phone. "I want to be the one to confront her," he said suddenly. "Alone?" "Absolutely not." I responded immediately. "These people are dangerous, Kyle." "She's my wife," he said, his voice cracking on the last word. "If anyone is going to demand the truth from her, it should be me." After some negotiation, we agreed on a compromise. Kyle would confront Madison, but the rest of us would be present. My father insisted on including my mother, believing she had a right to know what was happening. We gathered in my parents' suite, sending a message to Madison that there was a family emergency to discuss. While waiting for her to arrive, I pulled Kyle aside. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I asked, concerned about the hollow look in his eyes. "No," he admitted. "But I need to do it anyway." Madison arrived looking appropriately concerned, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, the picture of a supportive new wife ready to help her family through a crisis. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes moving from face to face. "Has something happened?" The room was tense with silence for a moment before Kyle stepped forward. "We know, Madison," he said quietly. "Or should I call you Erica? Or Catherine? Which name do you prefer these days?" Her expression flickered for just a moment, surprise, calculation, then back to concerned confusion. It was so quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. Kyle, what are you talking about? You're scaring me. Michael moved to the desk where his laptop was open. We have documentation of your previous identities. Marriage certificates, police reports, news articles about the men you've defrauded. Madison laughed, but it sounded forced. This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake, some woman who looks like me perhaps. No mistake, my father said grimly. We also have evidence that someone installed spyware on my computer during the wedding festivities. Someone who was trying to access my financial accounts. Madison's eyes narrowed slightly. She glanced toward the door, assessing her options. Don't even think about it, I warned. Security knows not to let you leave the property. This was a bluff. We hadn't actually spoken to security, but Madison didn't know that. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, she said, her voice taking on a harder edge. But I won't stand here and be accused of crimes I didn't commit. Kyle, surely you don't believe these lies. Kyle's face was a mask of pain. I want to believe you, Madison. More than anything. So explain it to me. Explain why there's a marriage certificate showing you married Lawrence Pemberton in Boston 4 years ago under the name Erica Donovan. For a moment, Madison maintained her facade of outraged innocence. Then, seeing the unwavering certainty in our faces, something changed. Her posture shifted, her expression hardened. And it was like watching a mask fall away. Well, she said, her voice entirely different now, clipped, cool, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place. This is certainly unexpected. I underestimated you, Dr. Mitchell. She nodded at Michael. Most people see what they want to see. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Kyle took a physical step backward, as if her transformation had struck him like a blow. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Was any of it real? Madison, or whoever she was, tilted her head, considering him. You were kind. I didn't dislike our time together, if that's what you're asking. But business is business. And what business is that exactly? My father demanded. Defrauding innocent people? Destroying lives? She smiled, a cold expression that never reached her eyes. I prefer to think of it as wealth redistribution. Men like you have more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. I simply help spread it around. To yourself, I said disgustedly. She shrugged. I provide a service. I make people happy, give them what they want, love, affirmation, excitement. The fact that it comes with a price tag is just business. Where are your accomplices? Michael asked. The people posing as your family? Already gone, she replied with a smirk. They left last night, actually. Standard procedure after the main event. The calculated way she spoke about the wedding, the main event, made my stomach turn. I couldn't imagine how Kyle was feeling. You won't get away with this, my father said. We've documented everything. The police. Will do what exactly? She interrupted. Charge me with marrying a man who willingly gave me access to his life? I haven't actually taken anything from you, Thomas. Not yet. And Kyle signed a prenuptial agreement that's quite generous to me, as I'm sure you'll recall. A prenup obtained under false pretenses, with a false identity, Michael pointed out. No court would uphold it. For the first time, Madison looked slightly less confident. Perhaps. But prosecuting me would mean publicly admitting how easily you were all fooled. The press would have a field day with that story. Prominent Chicago investor Thomas Reynolds nearly scammed by fake socialite. Is that publicity you want for your firm? The room fell silent as we absorbed her threat. She was right that a public scandal could damage my father's business reputation. Clients might question his judgment. You're forgetting something, Kyle said, his voice stronger now. The other men you've conned. I'm guessing they chose not to press charges for the same reasons, to avoid embarrassment. But together? That's a pattern. That's enough for federal charges. Madison's eyes flashed with momentary concern before she composed herself. Well, this has been fascinating. But I think our relationship has run its course. She reached for her purse, which she'd placed on a chair. I'll be leaving now. You won't find me, so don't bother trying. Actually, my father said, pulling out his phone. While we've been having this conversation, my security team has been freezing all my accounts and notifying the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're quite interested in speaking with you. Now real fear showed on Madison's face. You're bluffing. My father simply held up his phone, showing an email confirmation from the FBI acknowledging receipt of his information. You have two choices, he continued calmly. Wait here for the FBI to arrive. Or try running with nothing but the clothes on your back. Your operation has been exposed. Your accomplices have abandoned you. It's over. Madison looked around the room, her composed facade crumbling as she realized she was trapped. Her eyes settled on Kyle. I could have made you happy, she said, a final attempt at manipulation. We could have had a good life together. Kyle shook his head, his expression a mixture of disgust and pity. None of it was real. You never even existed. The hours following our confrontation with Madison were a blur of police statements, FBI interviews, and shocking revelations. Her real name, we learned, was Alexandra Petrovich. Born in Belgrade, Serbia, she had been running confidence schemes since her late teens, eventually graduating to the elaborate marriage and investment frauds that had brought her into our lives. The FBI had been tracking her network for years, but had always been one step behind. Her accomplices, the people who had posed as her parents and relatives at the wedding, were professional con artists who worked with various crews around the country. Some had already been identified by law enforcement, but most remained at large. Kyle was devastated. The sheriff's deputies who took Madison, Alexandra, away had to physically support him as he watched his bride of less than 48 hours being placed in a police car. The marriage would be annulled. Of course, but the emotional damage couldn't be so easily undone. The wedding guests were told a sanitized version of events, that Madison had misrepresented herself and the marriage was being annulled. Most assumed it was some kind of green card scam or secret past that had been discovered. Only our immediate family knew the full truth. In the days that followed, we discovered just how close Madison had come to succeeding. The keylogger on my father's computer had captured enough information to potentially access accounts containing millions of dollars. Had we not intervened when we did, she and her accomplices might have disappeared with a substantial portion of my father's assets. I still can't believe I was so blind, my father said as we sat in his study a week after the wedding. I'm supposed to be good at reading people. It's part of my business. She was a professional, Michael reminded him. This is what she does, what she's been doing for years. You can't blame yourself. I keep going over every moment, every conversation, Kyle said hollowly. He had moved temporarily into my parents' house, unable to face returning to the apartment he had shared with Madison in San Francisco. Trying to see if there were signs I missed. There were signs, I acknowledged. But they were subtle, and she was skilled at distracting from them. The important thing is that she didn't succeed. The FBI investigation revealed that Madison, Alexandra, had been planning this con for over a year. She had specifically targeted Kyle after identifying our father as a potential mark. His investment firm managed over $300 million in assets, making him an attractive target. She had created an elaborate backstory, complete with fake social media accounts going back years and paid actors to pose as references who could vouch for her if anyone checked. The most chilling discovery was a storage unit rented under one of her aliases. Inside were detailed files on our entire family, our habits, preferences, vulnerabilities. She had studied us like specimens, looking for the best way to infiltrate our lives and gain our trust. In the months that followed, our family went through a period of healing and rebuilding. My father implemented enhanced security measures for all his accounts and business dealings. My mother threw herself into supporting Kyle, arranging therapy sessions and making sure he wasn't alone with his thoughts for too long. Michael and I stayed in Chicago for 2 weeks after the wedding before returning to our own lives. We called Kyle daily, sometimes just sitting in silence on the phone when he couldn't find words to express his pain. Slowly, gradually, things began to improve. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, Kyle decided to move to Chicago to be closer to family. He found a position at a tech company downtown and rented a small apartment near my parents' house. 6 months out, he went on his first date, a casual coffee with a woman from his new workplace. It didn't lead to anything romantic, but it was a step toward normalcy. A year after the wedding, we gathered for a family dinner. It wasn't a celebration, exactly, but an acknowledgement of how far we'd come. Kyle was smiling again, telling jokes and talking about a promotion at work. My father had begun to trust his instincts again, though he now had a healthy skepticism that hadn't been there before. "You know what I've learned from all this?" Kyle said as we finished dessert. "It's not that people can't be trusted. It's that trust has to be earned over time, not given away in a rush of emotion. And real love doesn't try to separate you from your support system." My mother added, "It strengthens those connections." Michael squeezed my hand under the table. In a strange way, the ordeal had strengthened our marriage too. His instincts and persistence had protected our family from disaster, and my trust in him had never wavered, even when the accusations seemed impossible to believe. The case against Alexandra Petrovich was still making its way through the legal system. She had been connected to at least 5 other similar scams across the country, and prosecutors were confident she would face significant prison time. Some of her accomplices had been identified and arrested, though the man who had posed as her father remained at large. The FBI suspected he was the ringleader of the operation, using younger women as the face of the scams while he worked behind the scenes. As for our family, we had emerged stronger and wiser. The experience had taught us to trust our instincts when something feels wrong, to look beneath perfect surfaces for the truth underneath, and most importantly, to hold tight to the genuine connections that sustain us through life's challenges. We had been targeted because we were a close, trusting family, but in the end, it was those same qualities that had saved us. Our bonds had been tested but not broken. And Kyle, though still healing, had begun to look toward the future again. The woman he had loved might never have existed, but the capacity for love within him remained intact. One day, he would find someone worthy of that gift. If you've ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't quite right about someone, whether it was a stranger, a friend, or even a family member, I hope you'll remember our story. Trust your instincts. Look beneath the surface. And remember that real love, unlike the counterfeit version, can withstand scrutiny and stands the test of time. Have you ever had an experience where your intuition warned you about someone who seemed perfect on the surface? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story helped you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, protecting yourself and your loved ones starts with awareness. Thank you for listening. And I wish you relationships built on genuine trust and love.